I worked two jobs to survive, while my brother got everything handed to him. One day, my estranged uncle saw me delivering pizza, and he took me under his wing. But months later, my parents called me begging. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Holy shit, guys. I can't believe I'm actually typing this out, but here we are. This is gonna be long as hell, but trust me, the ending is worth it. I've been lurking on this sub for years, reading everyone else's stories about shitty families and revenge. Never thought I'd have one worth sharing. Boy, was I wrong. Some background. So I, 28 male, grew up in a middle-class family that was obsessed with appearances and status. Think suburban McMansion, leased luxury cars, and parents who measured their worth by how much they could brag to the neighbors. My mom, Linda, was one of those fake sweet women who volunteered at church just so people would tell her what a wonderful mother she was. My dad, Bob, sold insurance and thought he was some kind of business mogul because he drove a BMW, leased, obviously, and wore cheap suits from Men's Warehouse that he convinced himself looked expensive. Then there was my younger brother, Jake, 3 years younger than me and basically the second coming of Christ, according to my parents. Kid was average at soccer, got B's and C's in school, but you'd think he was heading to the World Cup in Harvard the way they carried on about his potential and natural talent. Me? I was just there. The practice kid. The rough draft before they had Jake and figured out how parenting was supposed to work. The favoritism wasn't even subtle, guys. Like, they didn't even try to hide it. I have memories from when I was probably 8 or 9 years old of Jake getting new toys, while I got told that Christmas is about giving, not receiving, when I asked why my pile was so much smaller. When I was 15, I saved up for months from my part-time job bagging groceries at Kroger to buy this used guitar. Found it at a pawn shop for $120, which was basically my entire net worth at the time. I'd been teaching myself to play from YouTube videos and was actually getting pretty decent. Music was like my escape from all the bullshit at home. One day I come home from school and find Jake in the living room playing my guitar. Not even playing it well, just strumming random chords and acting like he was some kind of rock star. When I asked for it back, Mom gave me this disappointed look and said, "Sharing is caring, Michael. Jake might be musically gifted too, and we need to nurture that." 2 days later, I found my guitar in the garage with a cracked neck. Jake had accidentally knocked it over. Instead of making him replace it or even apologize, Dad looked at me and said, "Maybe this will teach you to take better care of your things." The guitar was beyond repair, and I never got another one. That was like $120 down the drain, which was more money than I'd ever had in my life. But that was pretty much my entire childhood in a nutshell. Jake breaks something of mine? It's my fault for not putting it away safely. Jake needs something? Well, Michael doesn't really need his thing, does he? Jake wants the bigger room when we moved houses. Michael should be happy to help his little brother feel comfortable in his new space. The birthday thing still makes me angry thinking about it. For Jake's 16th birthday, they threw him this huge party, rented out the community center, hired a DJ, invited like 50 kids from school. There was a chocolate fountain, a freaking chocolate fountain, and they got him a used Honda Civic with a big red bow on top. Mom posted like 200 pictures on Facebook with captions like, "Our baby is growing up, and so proud of our amazing son." My 16th birthday? They took me to Applebee's, just the four of us, and Dad complained about the prices the entire time. When the waiter brought out the dessert with the candle, Jake spent the whole time talking about his upcoming soccer tryouts, while my parents hung on every word. I think I got like $50 and a gift card to Best Buy. No party, no friends, no car, definitely no Facebook posts. But the thing that really freaked with my head was how they talked about us to other people. At family gatherings, Mom would corner anyone who'd listen and go on and on about Jake's latest soccer goal, or how he was such a natural leader and so popular at school. When relatives asked about me, she'd get this tight, fake smile and say something like, "Michael's finding his way," or "he's more of a late bloomer," like I was some kind of charity case they were stuck with. I started spending more and more time away from home, worked extra shifts at the grocery store, stayed late at school for random clubs I didn't even care about, anything to avoid being in that house where I felt like a stranger who'd overstayed his welcome. By the time I graduated high school, I was basically invisible to them. They showed up to my graduation ceremony, but spent the whole time talking about Jake's upcoming senior year and how excited they were for his college recruitment meetings. I don't think they even clapped when my name was called. The message was crystal freaking clear. Jake was the investment. I was just an expense they had to deal with until I turned 18 and became someone else's problem. After graduation, Jake got accepted to State University on a partial soccer scholarship. Wasn't even a full ride, just partial. But you'd think he'd gotten recruited by Manchester United. They threw him this massive graduation party, bigger than my 16th birthday party that never happened. Invited like 100 people, had it catered, rented one of those inflatable obstacle courses. Mom posted an album on Facebook with like 80 pictures titled, Our Scholar Athlete. The comments were nauseating. You must be so proud. What an amazing young man. He's going to do great things. Mom replied to every single comment with paragraphs about Jake's accomplishments and potential. Meanwhile, I quietly enrolled at Riverside Community College because that's all I could afford. Filled out all the paperwork myself, figured out financial aid myself, registered for classes myself. I don't think my parents even knew I was planning to continue school until they saw the paperwork on the kitchen counter. It sat there for like 2 weeks before Mom used it as scrap paper for her grocery list. My schedule was absolutely brutal. I got a full-time job at AutoZone working 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., doing oil changes, replacing batteries, helping clueless suburban dads figure out why their lawnmower wouldn't start. The work was dirty and exhausting, but it paid $11 an hour, which was decent money for someone with no experience. Evenings, I delivered food for Jimmy's Wings from 5 p.m. to midnight. The owner, this gruff old guy named Sal, gave me this beat-up 2003 Honda Civic that looked like it had been through a war. The muffler was loud as hell, the AC was broken, and there was this weird stain on the passenger seat that smelled like old milk no matter what I did to clean it. But it ran, mostly, and gas was cheap back then. Between my two jobs, I was pulling in maybe $450 a week before taxes. After gas, insurance, books, and food, I was lucky to have $75 left over. Not exactly living the dream, but it was honest work, and nobody could say I wasn't trying. The real problem was housing. Mom and Dad made it pretty clear that now that I was 18, I needed to start acting like an adult and contribute to the household if I wanted to keep living at home. They wanted $300 a month for rent, plus my share of groceries and utilities. On my income, that would have left me with maybe $50 a week for everything else. I tried to negotiate, explained that I was going to school and working 2 jobs, asked if we could work something out. Dad just shrugged and said, "Welcome to the real world, son. Nobody gets a free ride." This was especially rich considering Jake's college was costing them like $15,000 a year after his partial scholarship. Plus, they were paying for his meal plan, his dorm room, his textbooks, even sending him spending money for emergencies. But sure, I was the one looking for a free ride, so I moved out. Couldn't afford an apartment, couldn't afford a room in a shared house, couldn't afford anything really. I started sleeping in my car behind the 24-hour Walmart on the edge of town. Figured it was safe, well lit, and there were always people around so nobody would mess with me. Sleeping in that Honda was absolute misery. I'm 6 feet 2 inches, and trying to fold myself into the backseat of a compact car every night was like some kind of medieval torture. I'd wake up with cricks in my neck, pins and needles in my legs, and this constant ache in my lower back that never really went away. In winter, I'd wake up with frost on the inside of the windows. In summer, I'd sweat through my clothes and have to change shirts in gas station bathrooms. The loneliness was almost worse than the physical discomfort. I'd go entire days without having a real conversation with anyone. My co-workers at AutoZone were mostly older guys who kept to themselves, and food delivery was just me, my car, and a bunch of drunk college kids who barely acknowledged my existence when they grabbed their orders. I'd see families at Walmart, parents with their kids, everyone looking normal and happy, and wonder what I'd done wrong to end up sleeping in a parking lot at 18 years old. Other kids my age were starting college, making friends, going to parties, having experiences. I was calculating whether I could afford both gas and food for the week. My grades at community college suffered because I was always exhausted. I'd fall asleep in morning classes because I'd been up until 2 a.m. delivering wings. I'd show up late because I'd overslept in my car and had to find somewhere to clean up before class. Professors would give me these disapproving looks like I was just another lazy student who didn't care about their education. If only they knew I was working 80 hours a week just to survive. Meanwhile, Jake was posting constant Instagram stories from college. Parties, football games, spring break trips that mom and dad were funding. College life! He'd caption pictures of himself on beaches I couldn't afford to visit in my dreams. The comments were always full of high school friends saying how jealous they were and how lucky he was to have such supportive parents. Lucky. Right. Everything changed on a Wednesday night in October, during my second year of this routine. I was having one of those nights where everything went wrong. 3 delivery orders got canceled, my car overheated twice, and I was running on maybe 4 hours of sleep from the night before. My last delivery was to this fancy office building downtown. Some law firm called Brennan and Associates was having a late-night strategy session and ordered like $200 worth of wings and sides. Biggest order of my shift, and I was actually excited because the tip was going to help me afford groceries that week instead of living on gas station hot dogs. I'm juggling like 6 insulated bags and trying not to trip over my own feet when this guy in an expensive suit walks out of the elevator. He stops dead when he sees me. Does this double take like he's seeing a ghost? Holy shit, Michael? I look up and nearly drop everything. It's my dad's older brother, Tony. Uncle Tony, who supposedly abandoned the family when I was like 8 years old. According to Dad, Tony was a show-off who thought he was better than everyone else and probably got his money through shady deals. The last time I'd seen Uncle Tony was at some family barbecue when I was a kid. I barely remembered him, except that he drove a really nice car, and Mom and Dad always got weird and tense when he was around. Uncle Tony? I stammered, feeling like an idiot standing there in my grease-stained Jimmy's Wings polo. He was older, obviously, but everything about him screamed success. The suit probably cost more than I made in 6 months. His watch was definitely a Rolex, and he had that confident posture of someone who owned things instead of owing people. Even his haircut looked expensive. Jesus Christ, kid. You're delivering food now? He looked genuinely shocked, like running into me there was the last thing he'd expected in the world. Yeah, just, you know, working my way through school. I tried to sound casual, but standing there next to my uncle who looked like he belonged on the cover of Business Week was pretty humiliating. Working your way through school. He repeated it slowly, like he was trying to process something that didn't make sense. What school? Riverside Community College. It's not much, but it's what I can afford. His expression changed, got harder, almost angry. And your parents know you're... He gestured at my uniform, the bags of food, my beat-up Honda parked illegally in a loading zone with the hazards blinking. I shrugged. They've got their hands full with Jake's college stuff, soccer scholarships and all that. Something shifted in his face. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet, handed me a business card. Not just any business card. This thing was thick, heavy cardstock with embossed gold lettering. Anthony Russo, CEO, Russo Holdings Group. Come see me tomorrow at 10 a.m., he said. His voice was different now, more serious. And Michael, don't tell your parents we talked. That night I couldn't sleep, and not just because I was back in my usual spot behind Walmart. I kept staring at that business card, using the McDonald's Wi-Fi to Google his company on my cracked phone screen. Russo Holdings Group was huge. Like, really huge. They owned 12 different companies. Restaurants, real estate development, construction, even a small chain of gyms. According to the Business Journal articles I found, Uncle Tony had started with a single pizza place 25 years ago and built it into this empire. Forbes estimated his net worth at somewhere north of $50 million. The same Uncle Tony my dad always called a lucky bastard, who probably doesn't even remember where he came from. I barely slept that night, kept wondering if this was real or if I was finally having some kind of breakdown from exhaustion and malnutrition. Uncle Tony's office was in this glass tower downtown that I'd driven past literally thousands of times, but never thought I'd actually enter. The lobby had marble floors, a waterfall wall, and the kind of modern art that costs more than most people's annual salary. I felt like I was in a different universe. The receptionist was this perfectly put-together woman who was polite but clearly confused about why someone in thrift store khakis and scuffed shoes was there to see the CEO. "Mr. Russo is expecting you," she said, like she couldn't quite believe the words coming out of her own mouth. The elevator ride to the 30th floor felt like ascending to heaven. When the doors opened, I stepped into what looked like something from a movie. Tony's office took up half the entire floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the whole city. The furniture looked like it belonged in a museum, and there was this massive mahogany desk that probably weighed more than my car. He was on a phone call when I walked in, talking numbers that made my head spin. "Tell them we'll go to $2.8 million, but not a penny more. No, I don't care what their counteroffer is. That's my final number. Fine. Walk away then. There's always another deal." He hung up and looked at me for a long moment, just really studied my face like he was seeing me for the first time. "Sit down, Michael. You want some coffee?" "Sure." My voice cracked like I was 13 again. He had this fancy espresso machine in the corner, made me a cup that tasted better than anything I'd ever had in my life. Probably cost more per ounce than I usually spent on food in a day. So, he said, settling back in his leather chair, tell me what's really going on. What do you mean? I mean, why is my nephew delivering chicken wings at midnight instead of being in college like a normal 20-year-old? And don't give me that working my way through school bullshit. I've been around long enough to spot desperation. And kid, you reek of it. So I told him everything, the favoritism, Jake's free ride, sleeping in my car, working 80 hours a week just to afford ramen noodles and gas station hot dogs. How I hadn't had a real conversation with my parents in months. How they treated me like I was an embarrassment to the family name. Tony's expression got darker and darker as I talked. By the time I finished, he looked genuinely pissed off. Those sons of bitches, he muttered under his breath. Your father always was a jealous, small-minded prick, but I didn't think he'd take it out on his own kid. What do you mean? Tony leaned back in his chair, stared out the window for a moment. Your dad and I had a falling out about 20 years ago. I was just starting out, had this little pizza place that was doing well, and I offered him a partnership. Would have made him rich if he'd stuck with it. But he was too proud, said he didn't need handouts from his show-off little brother. He turned back to me. Then when I started making real money, expanding the business, he got bitter. Started telling everyone who'd listen that I was probably laundering money or screwing over my business partners. Classic jealous older brother shit. Tony stood up and walked to the window. Truth is, I worked my ass off for everything I have. Started with nothing, just like you're doing now. Slept on a friend's couch for 2 years, ate ramen every day, wore the same 3 shirts until they fell apart. The only difference between me and you is that I had people who believed in me when it mattered. He turned back to me with this look I'd never seen from anyone in my family, like he was seeing potential instead of problems. How would you like to work for me? I nearly choked on my coffee. Work for you? Doing what? Learning the business. I've got 3 different companies that could use someone young and hungry. You'd start at the bottom, obviously. Filing, data entry, answering phones. But if you prove yourself, show me you've got what it takes, sky's the limit. He named a salary that made my head spin. $650 a week to start, plus health insurance and paid time off. That was more than I was making working 80 hours across 2 jobs. Why would you do this for me? I asked. Tony smiled, but it wasn't entirely a happy smile. Because your parents are about to learn what happens when you throw away something valuable just because you can't see its worth. I started the following Monday at Russo Construction, one of Uncle Tony's companies. My official title was Operations Assistant, but really I was just trying to absorb everything without making a fool of myself. The first few weeks were like trying to drink from a fire hose. Construction terminology, building codes, permit processes, vendor relationships, safety regulations. Everything was completely new to me. But for the first time in my life, I had people actually teaching me stuff instead of just expecting me to figure it out alone. My supervisor was this guy named Carlos, who'd been with Tony for 15 years. Worked his way up from carrying tools to running entire job sites. Your uncle doesn't hire family, he told me on my first day. So if you're here, it's because he sees something special. Don't make him look stupid. I threw myself into the work like my life depended on it. Because honestly, it did. Stayed late every day, asked a million questions, volunteered for weekend projects, read construction manuals in my spare time. Within 6 months, I was managing small residential renovation contracts on my own. Within a year, Tony moved me over to the real estate development side of the business. That's where things got really interesting. Tony owned about 200 rental properties scattered across the city. Plus, he was constantly buying rundown houses, renovating them, and flipping them for profit. The margins were absolutely insane when you knew what you were doing. Real estate isn't about the properties, Tony explained to me one day as we walked through a house we'd just bought for $85,000. It's about understanding people, what they want, what they can afford, what they think they deserve. Master that psychology, and you can make money in any market. He was right. We'd buy these beat-up houses in decent neighborhoods, put $25,000 to $30,000 into renovations. New kitchen, updated bathrooms, fresh paint, decent flooring, and sell them 6 months later for $160,000 to $180,000. Do that 5 or 6 times a year and you're looking at serious money. But Tony taught me something even more valuable than how to flip houses. He taught me how to think like a businessman instead of like an employee, how to see opportunities instead of just problems, how to make money work for me instead of the other way around. By my second year, I'd saved up enough to start doing small flips on my own with Tony as a silent partner. My first solo project netted me $38,000 profit. My second one brought in $52,000. I was making more in 6 months than I used to make in 2 years, and I was learning to live like it. Got myself a decent apartment, nothing fancy, but it had working heat and I didn't have to worry about getting mugged in the parking lot. Bought some clothes that didn't come from Walmart, got my car fixed so it didn't sound like a lawnmower having an asthma attack. But the best part wasn't the money, as crazy as that sounds. It was the respect. People at job sites listened when I talked. Contractors asked for my opinion on projects. Suppliers remembered my name and gave me good deals because they knew I was serious about the business. For the first time in my life, I felt like I mattered. Like I had value beyond just being someone's disappointing son or the kid who couldn't get his shit together. I'd completely cut contact with my family by this point. Changed my phone number, moved to a different part of town, didn't even send Christmas cards. As far as I was concerned, I was an orphan with a very successful uncle who actually gave a damn about my future. By year 4, I was making stupid money. Not just good money, stupid money. I'd bought and flipped 23 houses, had a portfolio of 8 rental properties, and had started my own small construction company that specialized in high-end bathroom and kitchen renovations. My personal net worth hit 7 figures, which still doesn't feel real when I think about it. I moved into a penthouse apartment downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the river. Bought myself a BMW M3. Not least, bought outright with cash because I could. Got custom suits tailored instead of wearing off-the-rack garbage. Started eating at restaurants where the waiters know your name, and the wine costs more than I used to make in a month. But I kept a relatively low profile. No flashy social media posts, no showing off at bars, no buying stupid expensive toys just to impress people I didn't care about. Tony had taught me that real wealth whispers, while fake wealth shouts, and the people who matter can tell the difference. I learned how to make my money work for me through investments, stock portfolios, and business partnerships. Started a second company doing property management for other real estate investors. Got into commercial real estate development. Every year, my income grew exponentially because I wasn't just working for money anymore. My money was working for me. The crazy part is how different people treated me once they figured out I had serious cash. The same type of people who used to look right through me when I was delivering food suddenly wanted to be my best friend. Women who wouldn't have given me the time of day started showing interest. Business owners who used to treat me like an annoyance started returning my calls immediately. It was educational, in a really depressing way, to see how much of human interaction is just based on perceived status and wealth. But I was finally on the right side of that equation. Meanwhile, through Tony's connections, I kept tabs on my biological family. And guys, the schadenfreude was delicious. Jake had graduated college with a business degree and 0 real-world skills. Turns out 4 years of partying and doing the absolute minimum academically doesn't prepare you for adult life. He'd bounced between 5 different entry-level jobs in 2 years, getting fired from each one for showing up late, calling in sick constantly, or just generally being an entitled brat who expected praise for basic tasks. Mom and Dad were still financially supporting him, of course, paying his rent on a shitty studio apartment, his car payment, his groceries, even giving him spending money for dates and entertainment. But their own finances were getting stretched thin. Dad's insurance business was struggling hard. Turns out nobody wants to buy insurance from a guy who drives a 12-year-old BMW with rust spots and wears suits that look like they came from a discount rack. The whole fake it till you make it strategy only works if you eventually actually make it. Mom's little boutique clothing store had gone under during COVID and never recovered. She was working part-time at Target now, which had to be humiliating for someone who used to brag about being a business owner to all her church friends. Jake had applied for jobs at half the companies in town, including several that did business with my construction company. Word gets around in business circles, and Jake's reputation for being unreliable had spread. He was basically unemployable in any field that required actual responsibility. That's when Uncle Tony came to me with an opportunity that was too perfect to pass up. "Your brother applied for a job at the restaurant," he told me over dinner one night. "Assistant manager position, $32,000 a year. Didn't realize the connection until I saw the last name on the application. I nearly choked on my steak. What did you tell them?" Tony grinned like a shark. "That we'd get back to him." That's when the idea hit me. The perfect, beautiful, absolutely devastating idea that would teach my family exactly what happens when you treat people like garbage for 20 years. "Uncle Tony," I said slowly, "how would you feel about helping me give them a lesson they'll never forget?" The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I had connections throughout the city now, contractors, business owners, real estate agents, bank managers. Tony had even more connections, plus 25 years of favors he could call in. We were going to systematically destroy my family's life piece by piece, and they'd never even know it was happening until it was too late. It started with Jake's job search. I made sure that every single application he submitted got quietly rejected. Not obviously, we couldn't make it look coordinated, but a word here and there about an unreliable candidate or someone who might not be a good cultural fit was enough to get him blacklisted from pretty much every decent job in town. Next, I had my real estate connections make sure my parents' house appraisal came in way lower than expected when they tried to refinance their mortgage. Nothing illegal or unethical, just professional opinions that their outdated kitchen, old HVAC system, and deferred maintenance really hurt the property value. Their refinancing application got denied, leaving them stuck with a high-interest mortgage they could barely afford. Then there was Jake's girlfriend, Stephanie. Turned out she worked at a marketing firm that did advertising for several of my companies. Small world, right? After a few casual conversations over coffee, I learned that Stephanie was getting pretty fed up with supporting a grown man who couldn't hold down a job and spent his days playing video games while she worked 50-hour weeks. I didn't have to do much there, just be a sympathetic ear. You know, Stephanie, you seem like you've got your life together. You deserve someone who matches your ambition. A little encouragement in the right direction, and she dumped Jake for a guy with an actual career and his own apartment. Within 4 months, my family was in complete freefall. Jake was unemployed, single, and living in his childhood bedroom again. Mom and Dad were 3 months behind on their mortgage and facing foreclosure. Dad's business was hemorrhaging the few clients he had left, and Mom was working extra shifts at Target just to keep the lights on. But the best part was still coming. I was having lunch at this upscale steakhouse downtown when I spotted a familiar figure approaching my table. Dad, looking like he'd aged 15 years in the past 6 months. His cheap suit was wrinkled and too big for him now. Stress had made him lose weight. His face was gaunt, his hair was going gray, and he had the desperate look of a man who'd run out of options. Michael, he said tentatively, like he wasn't sure it was really me. Jesus, son, you look successful. I looked up from my $45 ribeye like I was seeing a stranger. I'm sorry. Do I know you? The color drained from his face. It's me, your father, Bob Wilson. Wilson? I pretended to think about it. Took another bite of steak. Doesn't ring a bell? Are you sure you have the right person? Michael, please. His voice cracked a little. I know we haven't talked in a while, but we're family. We need to talk. I made a big show of checking my Rolex, a $15,000 Submariner that cost more than he used to make in 6 months. I've got maybe 5 minutes before my next meeting. What do you need? He sat down without being invited, looking around at the restaurant like he couldn't believe his son could afford to eat there. The other diners were well-dressed business people and wealthy retirees, the kind of people who used to intimidate the hell out of him. We're going through a rough patch, he said quietly. Jake can't find work anywhere. We're behind on the house payment. And I heard through Tony that you've done well for yourself. Tony Russo? I raised an eyebrow. Yeah, he's been like a father to me. Really stepped up when my actual family decided I wasn't worth their time. Dad flinched like I'd slapped him. Michael, we made mistakes. We know that now. But we're still family, and family helps family when times get tough. I actually laughed out loud at that. Several people at nearby tables turned to look at us. Family helps family? That's freaking rich, Bob. Where was that philosophy when I was sleeping in my car? Where was family when I was working 80 hours a week just to afford ramen noodles? We didn't know it was that bad. Bullshit. I leaned forward, lowered my voice to just above a whisper. You didn't care enough to know. There's a big freaking difference. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant. Perfect timing. I have to go. Business calls, you understand. I stood up and pulled out my wallet, dropped 2 $100 bills on the table. That should cover lunch, I said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Consider it charity. I walked away without looking back, but I could feel him watching me leave, probably trying to process how his failure of a son was now the kind of person who tips more than he makes in a day. Over the next few weeks, they got increasingly desperate. Mom started showing up at my apartment building, crying to the doorman about how she just needed to see her son. The doorman, who I tip very well at Christmas, politely told her I wasn't available. Jake sent me long, rambling text messages about how sorry he was, how he'd always looked up to me, how he just needed one chance to prove he could change. I deleted them without responding. Dad tried to corner me at Tony's office building, which resulted in security escorting him out. That was probably the most humiliating thing that had ever happened to him, getting manhandled by security guards in front of a lobby full of successful business people. But the absolute best part came when all 3 of them showed up at my favorite coffee shop at the same time. It was like they'd coordinated this ambush. which they probably had. They looked like refugees from their own lives. Mom was crying before she even started talking. Dad was sweating through his shirt despite the air conditioning. And Jake looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. Michael, please, Mom sobbed, literally falling to her knees next to my table. We'll do anything. We know we messed up, but you can't just abandon your family. We raised you. We fed you. We put a roof over your head for 18 years. I sipped my $7 latte and looked at them like they were panhandlers who'd wandered in off the street. The other customers were starting to stare, which made this even more perfect. See, here's the thing, I said calmly. You had 20 years to be my family. 20 years to show me that I mattered, that I was worth something, that you gave a damn whether I lived or died. Instead, you chose to treat me like an inconvenience while worshiping the ground Jake walked on. But we're choosing now, Jake interrupted desperately. We want to make it right. We know we freaked up. Oh, now you want to make it right? I stood up and they all scrambled backward like I was going to hit them. Now that I have money, now that I can solve your problems, now you remember you have another son. I pulled out my phone and showed them a photo from the business journal. Me and Tony at a charity gala the month before. Both of us in $3,000 tuxedos, surrounded by the mayor, several city council members, and the kind of people who make decisions that affect entire industries. See this? These are my people now. This is my family. These are people who believed in me when you couldn't be bothered to learn my middle name. These are people who saw potential in me when all you saw was an inconvenience. Mom was sobbing harder now, makeup running down her face. We're going to lose everything. The house, everything we worked for. We'll be homeless. I nodded sympathetically. That really sucks. But you know what? I lost my family 20 years ago when you decided Jake was worth everything and I was worth nothing. Somehow I survived. I'm sure you'll figure it out too. The coffee shop had gone completely silent. Everyone was staring at this train wreck unfolding in the corner. I was putting on quite a show, and I was loving every second of it. Please, Dad whispered, his voice barely audible. We're begging you. We know we were wrong. We'll make it up to you. We'll do whatever you want. Just please help us save the house. I pretended to consider it for a moment, tapping my finger on my chin like I was deep in thought. Then I smiled. Not a nice smile, but the kind of smile a shark gives right before it bites. You know what? I'll help you. Their faces lit up with hope. It was beautiful to watch. I'll help you the exact same way you helped me when I was sleeping in my car and eating gas station hot dogs for dinner. I paused for effect. I'll give you the same support, the same encouragement, the same love and attention you gave me for 20 years. The hope died in their eyes as they realized what I was saying, which is to say, I'll do absolutely freaking nothing. You're on your own, just like I was. I started walking toward the door, then turned back one last time. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the perfect ending to my perfect revenge. Oh, and Jake? Remember that marketing firm where your ex-girlfriend Stephanie works? The one that does advertising for local businesses? I grinned. I bought it last month, paid cash $1.2 million. Stephanie's actually my director of client relations now. Got her a nice raise and a company car. She speaks very highly of her new boyfriend, by the way. Seems like a real go-getter. Jake's face went completely white. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. And Dad? That construction project downtown, the one your insurance company was hoping to get the contract for? That's my building. I decided to go with a different insurance provider. Someone more reliable. Dad looked like he was going to be sick. Mom, I heard Target's cutting hours again. Tough break. But hey, maybe Jake can get a job there too. If they're hiring, which I doubt. I walked toward the door one final time.